Shalom, Mashapaknia, peace, family. First and foremost, I want to give all the praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who rule well. And peace, mercy to the hopeful elect, the 144,000 men that are doing this work in sincerity and in truth across the four corners of the earth. And much love to the one-third and the innumerable multitude of you believers out there. To you all, I say Shalom. I'm the brother Yeshaya from the Great Millstone West Palm Beach Church. And I pray, Lord willing, that this lesson is edifying through the Spirit. All right. So this is actually, I'm not going to make it too long. But this is actually, I had a slip of the tongue. Actually, maybe I should get that scriptures first. Slip of the speech. And this is the importance of going over things, over in time, revisiting certain lessons, so basically just to give you a backstory. So this past week at camp on Sunday, and we brought out a lot of edifying things, of course, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shemal Shai. But it was funny, we had this woman come up. We was cutting her and dicing her up through the spirit. But there was one thing. She was like, well, what about... I still defended it today. In some way, I was still right. But she was like, yeah, but what about the woman at the well? No, she was like, what about John 4? That's what she said. She's like, do you know what John 4 is about? And I was like, yeah, that's the woman at the well. So then she said, well, she was like, she said like she was a heathen. She wasn't an Israelite. And so I was like, well, and it's funny because I tried to tap in real quick, but the spirit was just moving. I sometimes I used to get confused, the woman at the well and the Syrophoenician woman, which one was an Israelite and which one was a heathen. So as we were reading John 4, I was like, yeah, she was an Israelite. I knew in my spirit said that's not true. And so I was like, Bar. I was like, it's on the sly while she was talking. So I was like, hey, is the woman at the well of Jake? But then we had to jump right back into it. So the spirit was just moving, but through the spirit, I'm glad because it helped me revisit this story and the breakdown and the understanding on it. We always got to keep our sword sharpened. And so at the time, I was like, yeah, she was a Jake. I was like, she was an Israelite, because we were talking about Israelite foreigners, and at the end of the day, the point was still made, even though I was incorrect about this point. The woman at the well was not an Israelite. She was a heathen. And at the end of the day, we are man enough to say when we made an error, but really, it was a slip of the tongue. It was a slip of the speech. I knew in my mind what the answer was, but sometimes when the spirit flows, this flesh, man, but I knew the answer. But nonetheless, I wanted to get this scripture. This is Ecclesiastes 19:16. It says, there is one that slippeth in his speech, but not from his heart. And who is he that hath not offended with his tongue? You see, so I had to slip of the speech, but not from my heart. Let me see if I can look this one up too. Because in my mind, I knew your heart is your mind. In my mind, I knew the answer and I knew it. I'm like, that lady's a heathen. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I gotta deal with it, and I had to face it afterwards. After I was talking about it, I'm like, I was talking with the brothers. I'm like, yeah, that lady was a heathen. I'm doing my research, going back and watching some of the elders and the brothers' videos. And I'm like, yeah, I was incorrect. And if I saw her again, I would tell her that there was it was a mistake. But it was an honest mistake. I really didn't mean to say that. It says, and when you slip in your speech, it hurt, man. My God damn it. Like, even though she ain't know, we was 10 steps ahead of her. So she couldn't recognize the error. You know what I'm saying? Because she was taught in Christian school. So she was wrong about everything else. Hey, and I'm gonna get into the breakdown in a second. But even I had to cut her on Adam and Eve. She was like, Adam and Eve were the only people on the earth. I'm like, all right, let's analyze that. Adam and Eve, it was only them two. And I said, then how many children do they have? And another girl said Cain and Abel. I said, right. So even though they had Seth too, but they had Cain and Abel, I said, right. So if there were no other people, how did the other people be born and who were they having sex with? Are you telling me that Cain and Abel had sex with their mother? And one of them tried to say, well, incest was happening all the time, which isn't true, right? That instance took place under Lot with his daughters after they thought it was over and they had to continue their legacy and their lineage. But that was the time to happen. That didn't happen with Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. They weren't having sex with their mother. There were other people there. So we wouldn't break that down. So like I said, we were 10 steps ahead of the girl. But nonetheless, Ecclesiasticus 20 and 18, it says, to slip upon a pavement is better than to slip with the tongue. So the fall of the wicked shall come speedily. Right? So it says, to slip upon pavement, falling on the ground is better than when you be like, damn, man, I messed up in that. But she didn't catch it. So at the end of the day, but I caught it. I knew in my mind. And so, it's all through the spirit. But let me get into this breakdown real quick. So, and I don't intend on making this too long, but this is John 4. And I'm going to start at verse 6. Might be bouncing around a little bit. But it says, now Jacob's well was there. Yahushua, therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well. And it was about the 6th hour. Okay? And that was about noon. It says, there cometh the woman of Samaria to draw water. Yahushua saith unto her, give me to drink. And Yahushua is the name of the Lord. It's not Jesus. His name is Yahushua. He delivers. It says, give me to drink. For his disciples were gone away into the city to buy meat. Then said the woman of Samaria unto him, how is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Right? So she understood the difference there as well. Okay? It says, Yahushua answered and said unto her, if thou knewest the gift of the Most High, and who it is that saith to thee, give me to drink, thou wouldst have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. So he's like, if you knew who you were talking to, you could be getting the living water instead of just under and about this water, right? It says, the woman said unto him, sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence hast thou that living water? So where you going to get this living water from? He says, art thou greater? No, this is her talking. Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us the well and drank thereof himself, and his children and his cattle? You see, so this is where it gets confusing. This is why I got tripped up, because it says our father Jacob. And I had the spirit, I was like, man, something about that one, right? And I was trying to remember. But it says, Yahushua answered and said unto her, whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again. Okay, so basically, before I go any further on that, to get some understanding, first off, let me go to understanding Samaria, right? Samaria was dealing with a lot of times you'll read about how it relates to the northern kingdom, and I had the definition here as well. Samaria, the word Samaria is Shamarwan. All right, like Simeon is Shemaiwan. This one is Shamarwan, which is essentially a watch mountain. Shamar means to watch, and when you put wan on the end of a word like that, it means mountain. So watch mountain. It says the region, and it says North Palestine, but that's through, because really is the land of Jerusalem. But it says the region or outside of Jerusalem. The region of northern Palestine associated with the northern kingdom of the 10 tribes of Israel, which split from the kingdom after the death of Solomon during the reign of his son Rehoboam, and were ruled by Jeroboam. It says the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel located 30 miles north of Jerusalem and 6 miles north of Shechem, right? But if you understand the history of what happened, there were a lot of people displaced and put in certain lands where were belonging to Jake. Hey, shit, even just like 70 AD, right? We were fled out of there. Romans went in there. They took our history. They took our scrolls, right? Assyrian letters and things like that, that when we were in captivity, all of those types of things were taking place. So it's really, this lady is, through the spirit, this lady is an Amalekite, because They dwell in, look, you got that's the so-called Jews. They dwell in our land right now, which the scriptures say a bastard shall dwell in Ashdod, right, which is the port city of Israel, right? They're dwelling in our land, acting like us. That's why she said our father Jacob, right? If you know how the Amalekites act, the so-called Jews act, they'll say they're the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They'll say that. So when they sit up and murmur things like this, they believe that to their core that they're God's chosen people, but they're just incorrect. All right, they're wrong. All right. So let me read this first. This is Matthew 10:5. It says, "Then these 12 Yahushua sent forth and commanded them, saying, Go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as ye go, preach, saying, The kingdom of heaven is at hand." Is because why? Why would he say that? Why is the Lord saying, don't go to the Gentiles, don't go to Samaria? Because he knew that the heathen had trodden down those lands. The heathen had taken over. That's just like right now. Now, are there Israelites spreading amongst every country? Absolutely. But if you go to Israel right now, you're not going to see so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans completely taking over the land, living, ruling over there. You're going to see so-called white peoples with little goddamn cornrow twisties hanging off the sides of their hair, with yarmulkes on and big hats, small hats, right? Wearing weird clothing with tzitzits on, right? Doing homosexual and bugged out stuff. It's because them people over there, they not God's chosen people. All right? Those are all heathen for the most part. All right? Even though some Jake that's over there too, but those are heathen, man. They following heathenistic customs. So that just because a man takes over your land doesn't mean that it belongs to you're a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It says in the Greek, the word is Samarites. It says an inhabitant of the city of Samaria, an inhabitant of the region of Samaria, right? So that's where you have. So just because you live somewhere, don't mean you derive from that ethnic group. Okay, let me see here. Now we got to get the history on it. 2 Kings 17. Right, history is powerful, and when you understand the Bible gives us these contexts for things that happened in history, so we can understand the secular history about things that took place. Right, Second Kings 17, and I'm gonna jump down to verse 24. Let me start at 22. For the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did. They departed not from them. So our people were being wicked. Until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight. As he has said by all his servants the prophets, so was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria unto this day. So the northern kingdom were sent off to Assyria, and eventually you had the northern kingdom, and then the southern kingdom with the Babylonian captivity. So it says we were removed out of our land. So the real Israelites are not in the land of Jerusalem right now. And it even says as unto this day, right? Babylon is really the modern day Assyria, but we not in Samaria. We not in Jerusalem. We not in Israel. We not in our home. All right? You got heathen dwelling in our land. Okay? It says, and the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon, and from Cutha, and from Ava, and from Hamath, and from Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel, and they possessed Samaria and dwelt in the cities thereof. Really, I can stop the lesson there, but I'm going to keep going, because basically you had all of these different people from these different lands that they were placed in Israel because the Israelites were taken into captivity, right? So you're not having a group of people who that land belongs to them. It's just like, like I said, Roman persecution. A lot of lands that men dwelt in, that Israel was in, Other people were put into those lands. That's why you got like the Khazars, right? The Germans, right? They lived in certain shit. Even Esau himself, you know, Esau coming. He's a nomad and he's a fugitive and a vagabond, right? A vagabond is somebody who travels place to place. So they took them out of those lands, out of the Caucasus Mountains, out of the what's that shit called? Mount Petra, you know, the caves, the clefts of the rock, all these different places. These heathen and shit. It was other nations over there too, but they came and they says the placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. So if you got a so-called Jew, they'll say our father Jacob, but it don't belong to them, right? The land doesn't belong to them. They just live there. We always mention how the word Israeli means inhabitant of. The word Israelites means descendant of. And those are Israelis dwelling in our land, not the true descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. All right? So that's really a cut. That's all that lady was. She's an inhabitant. She's not a descendant. It says, and so it was at the beginning of their dwelling there, that they feared not the Lord Yahweh. Therefore the Lord sent lions among them, which slew some of them. Wherefore they spake to the king of Assyria, saying, the nations which thou hast removed, excuse me, y'all, I'm stuffy. Jake haven't been feeling well. I gotta sneeze, Salaki. Salaki. It says, the nations which thou hast removed and placed in the cities of Samaria know not the matter of the God of the land. Therefore he hath sent lions among them, and behold, they slay them, because they knew not the matter of the God of the land. The power. They don't know Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. So the Lord was judging them. Matter of fact, in the NLT, it says, the people you have sent to live in the towns of Samaria do not know the religious customs of the power of the land. He has sent lions among them to destroy them, because they have not worshipped him correctly. You see? So they were getting judged because they ain't the ones who belong there. And like the elder priest Shaman said, he said, the thing about Jerusalem and Samaria, Israel, the land rejects people that don't belong there. So that's where you got the Israelis, the so-called Jews, the Palestinians fighting over that land. That's where they're fighting like that. That's the controversy of Zion. They fighting over that because that land is fighting back against them. The Lord is fighting back against them because they not the real priests. They not the ones who's supposed to be over there. So the land is rejecting them. Even though they think they're living and that's the holy land, it don't belong to y'all. Y'all ain't the holy people. It says, then the king of Assyria commanded, saying, carry thither one of the priests whom you brought from thence, and let them go and dwell there, and let him teach them the manner of the power of the land. So they're like, get one of those Levites that y'all took away and bring them back here so they can teach them how to serve Yahweh. Right? Then one of the priests whom they had carried away from Samaria came and dwelt in Bethel and taught them how they should fear the Lord. So they had priests that would come back, that they were forced to come back and show you, all right, what are your customs? What is the language? So this is where the Yiddish, you get the Yiddish breakdown, where they get the watered down Hebrew. You get when they call them fake names. This is why they say Adonai and Elohim, right? Them trying to change our language. This is why they wear the zits in the corners of their garments instead of wearing them all the way around. This is why when it says the matter of the hair and how you supposed to not supposed to get lineups in Leviticus 19 and Leviticus 21, they just rock the little curly thing, thinking that's talking about the edges of their hair. So he taught them things, but it's also things they changed and finessed and made up along the way. It says, howbeit every nation made gods of their own and put them in the houses of the high places which the Samaritans had made, every nation in their city where they dwelt. You see? And so basically they go on to create and making more gods and fearing. Fearing and making their own gods. And the Lord didn't play that. Right? The Lord wanted to destroy them. But at the end of the day, this is always for the children of Israel. This is, jump down to verse 34. Unto this day they do after the former manners. They fear not the Lord, neither do after their statutes or after their ordinances or after the law and the commandment which the Lord commanded the children of Jacob, whom he named Israel. All right? So the Israelites are the one who's supposed to be serving him in that land. And that's why he said the time is going to come when he's going to place us back in our own land. Because right now we got a heathen living over there. So this woman at the well, she's basically a so-called Jew who's thinking that this is about her. But it wasn't. She wasn't one of the Lord's people. All right? It says, he goes on, he says, John 14 and 16, Yahweh said unto her, go call thy husband and come hither. Because back in those times, you had to be, you weren't supposed to be out and about walking by yourself as a woman. You usually had your husband with you, you know? And even still, women didn't have the same level of pride and things like that. But, you know, you were generally accompanied by your husband. But it says, the woman answered and said, I have no husband. Yahweh said unto her, thou hast well said, I have no husband, for thou hast had 5 husbands. And he whom thou know now is not thy husband, and that sayest thou truly. All right, so you done had 5 men, and you're not even with, you with a whole other man now. So he prophesied on her, man. The woman said unto her, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. It said, Yahweh said unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at the Jerusalem worship the Father. You know, he cutting her. He's like, you're not one of the God's most chosen people. It says in the NLT, Yahweh shall reply, believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. You Samaritans know very little about the one you worship, while we Jews know all about him. For salvation comes through the Jews. So verse 22 in the KJV, it says, ye worship, ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. So ultimately the Jews are all, it is the Southern Kingdom, technically the so-called blacks, but it's still all the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, because he's letting them know that's like us talking to a so-called Jew, a fake Israelite, Israeli, and telling them, hey, y'all don't know what y'all talking about. You know, we tell them Atah lo Yehudi, which means you are not a Jew. So the Samaritans ultimately is like Amalek. They believe that they're the God's chosen people, and they're not. He said it's not gonna matter where you worship, because you worship what you know not. You know not that Yahweh Shemel Shai. They don't even know his names. They don't believe in the Messiah truly. They don't follow the Torah. You know, they follow the damn Talmud, man. They don't keep the law, statutes, commandments. They the most wicked people on the earth, man. So this woman was not an Israelite, right? She was a heathen. Okay, she was a heathen, and so ultimately she gonna be a slave in the kingdom of heaven, man. But I did want to mention that. But I was just talking about the Israelite foreigners with the young lady. So the Spirit had me talk about that and discuss that. But this lets you know, hey, the Lord let her know. So her example was, well, what about the woman at the well? Well, the Lord told her it ain't gonna matter. He told her straight up, believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. Because you a heathen, you a Edomite, you an Amalekite. It don't matter, because they're about to lose big time, man. The Edomites are going into slavery. That's biblical prophecy. All right. So, hey, I want to wrap it up with that. You know, I just wanted to get that correction out. You know, Salakia, I pray Yahweh Shemel Shai and you brothers forgive me. You know what I'm saying? We always trying to be on point, but we able to accept our errors in this flesh as well. So, hey, I pray, Lord willing, that this lesson was edifying. I want to give all the praise, the honor, the glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham, Rakakodash, double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone to rule well, and peace and mercy to the elect. Until next time, Shalom.